Hi class, I thought I would create a video and show you how to complete some of the pieces of this assignment so that if you did not earn the full points or you did not turn it in, go ahead and watch this video and then submit the assignment. I will still accept it late. So for this assignment, you're practicing how to create functions and formulas. So you want to go ahead and you're going to start with your cursor in cell G4. And so the idea is you have a grade book here with some students, right? These are fake students, Artie, Beyonce, Prince, so on and so forth. And they each completed 5 homework assignments, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And these are the grades that they earned. So maybe you want to use Excel to look at how your students did. And so if I wanted to see what the highest grade Artie earned is, well, I could look here and I can see he earned a 78. I could type a 78 here, but that doesn't create a flexible worksheet. And one of the things with Excel that you want to think about is creating a worksheet that is flexible. So that if I were to add 10 more homework assignments, I could put some math in cell G4 and it could look at the cells and it would always pick out the highest one, even as I would add more homeworks. So so we want to talk about the difference between a function and a formula. A function is math that Excel writes for you, and a formula is math that you, the human being, write yourself. So we're going to use a function called the max function to find the highest grade. And on the home ribbon, all the way at the end, in the editing panel, there's this button called Auto Sum. And there are 5 functions here. You're actually going to practice all of them in this assignment: sum, average, count, max, and min. These are so popular that there's a shortcut to them on the home ribbon. You can find all the same formulas right here on the formula ribbon, and you can see there's that sum, and it's right there as well. And you'll explore the formula ribbon and more about Excel as you work through the next couple of weeks. So I want to use a max function here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose max from the drop-down list. So you want to place your cursor, you want to select the cell where you want the answer to appear. And when you insert the function that way, what Excel does is it'll look to the left of it or it looks above it. And if it sees numbers, it grabs it. And so in this case, it grabbed these numbers to the left. And you want to say, okay, did it grab all the right numbers? Well, it did. So I can just press the enter key. And there it goes. It put 78 in. And so I'm going to go ahead and double click this cell. That puts us into edit mode. You can see that I am using the function called max, and I'm linking to the cells B4 to F4. I'm creating what's called a relative cell reference. What that means is, I'm going to press the escape key, is that when I enter a function this way, and you can also see it up here in the formula bar, once I've used relative cell referencing, if I pull my fill handle down, that'll allow me to copy the contents of what's in cell G4. And what happens is if I were to double click any one of these, it copies the max function, but it changes the location of the cells from where they originally began, pressing the escape key. So I started here, B4 to F4, escape. I come down here, I got B8 to F8. So what happened was Excel went ahead and it copied the function, but it incremented the cell locations. That's creating a flexible worksheet. You write the formula, or excuse me, you write the function one time, you can copy it many times. Remember, the fill handle allows you to copy content from the cell. All right, so using that same logic, we're going to go over here to the lowest grade. So instead of using the max function, we're going to use a min function, right? That's going to look at a range of cells, a group of cells that I select, and find the lowest number. So I click on min, the same thing happens. So in this case, it inserted the min function, but it grabbed all the cells to the left. So this is where you want to pause and say, hey, did it grab all the correct cells? Well, the answer is no. I don't want to include the highest grade. I just want to look at the homework assignments. I don't want to include the highest grade in that. So right now we have an active selection of these, like we call these the marching ants. So what you can do is you just want to edit this. You could type you could replace the G4 with an F4 right here. Or what I like to do is when I have an active range going, I just grab my cursor and I hover it over the center of the cell when I see the thick white plus, and then I left click, hold, and drag and select the correct range of cells. Okay, and I can press enter. All right, I'll do that again, Control Z. I'll go ahead and put in that min function. And this time, instead of selecting the cells, I could just come right here and backspace and type F. What am I doing? F4. Sorry, for a second I had to think. And by the way, it does not have to be uppercase. I could type lowercase. If I can press enter, I can click this check mark right up here on the formula ribbon, and that's the same as pressing the enter key, but it doesn't move my cursor down. And so obviously 1 is the smallest number. So I can use my fill handle to pull that all the way down. All right, the next one is asking you how many homeworks have been given. Well, we know there are 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I counted. All right, there is a function, a count function, and what the count function does is it literally counts boxes on a worksheet. It counts these cells, right? And so I can come up here, you can say count numbers. So in this case, it's going to count any cells that I select that have numbers in it. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the count numbers. And now I'm going to make a mistake on purpose to show you how this function works. So you would stop and you would say, okay, did it select all the right cells? Well, no, I don't want to include the highest grade and the lowest grade because that's not part of the homework, right? I should get the number 5 here. So I'm going to press enter and I got 7, which I should, because if I double click this, it's actually selecting 7 cells. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I don't want it to count all of those cells, right? So I can just modify this and type F4 and I should get a 5. Now I can pull my fill handle down, or you can actually double click the fill handle and that'll do the same thing. All right. Last one is the average. I want to know what the average already earned on his 5 homework. So to calculate an average, you would add these 5 numbers and divide by the number of assignments, which would be 5. I could type that in here, but why type it in when I have a function that will literally do that for me? Average. So I click that. I ask myself the question, did I select the correct range of cells? Nope. I only want these 5 homeworks. So I'm going to select those, press enter, and then use my fill handle. Okay. You're going to use the same logic down here, but instead of looking to the left, you're now going to look at homework individually. So when you put your average function, you're going to look at this range of cells. Okay. Highest grade, this range of cells. Sorry, this range of cells. And lowest grade, this range of cells. All right. I'm going to pause it for a moment and I'll show you how to create the spark line. Okay, I went ahead and entered in the functions here. I know that you guys can do that now that I've shown you kind of the pattern up here, but here's a little trick for you. I can select this one cell and I could use my fill handle all the way across because I did use relative cell referencing. But because I have this set up in a tabular format and the information is repeating, these homeworks are repeating, I can actually select all 3 of these at one time and then come back with my fill handle and copy it all the way across. All right, I'm going to go ahead and zoom up in my worksheet a little bit so it's a little bit easier for you guys to see what's happening. So right here in this cell, I want to insert a spark line. What a spark line is a mini chart that lives inside a cell. And so what you want to do is you want to place your cursor where you want the little chart to appear. And we're going to go up here to the insert ribbon. Insert, sorry. And then right over here in the spark lines panel, I'm going to do a line spark line that's coming from the assignment. And so I click that. And what happens is it's saying, all right, what range of cells do you want to make a chart out of? And I want it to be the homework average. So it's going to be these cells right here. So with my cursor inside the data range box, we call this an attribute, I can come straight out to the worksheet and just use my cursor to select the range. So you should notice that little dialog box got small. That's supposed to happen. And when I let go of my mouse, it comes back. This other location, you don't need to mess with that. What that's saying is when they make the chart, where will it live? It's going to live in cell G14. The dollar signs around G14 mean something specific. It means that it's an absolute cell reference. And I'm going to talk about that on the next worksheet. Okay, so I click OK, and that puts my spark line in. Now, just like in Microsoft Word, if we add anything to an Excel workbook besides numbers, so we insert a chart or a picture or a table or a smart art, we're going to get 1 or 2 additional ribbons up here that allow us to do the formatting. And so one of the things I asked you guys to do is add the markers. That adds the little data points or adds where each of these numbers are, just so you can kind of see how that chart goes. And you can pick a style. I might have given you a specific style, but you can pick anything you like. When I teach it in person, I let students pick whatever they like. Okay, and so what happens is I can look at this little chart and I could tell a story about it, right? I could see that, okay, the students, first of all, these are not great grades. These students are not doing well, 56 is the average on the homework. So perhaps I'm not being a great instructor if I'm their teacher. But you can see that maybe I taught the students and they didn't do so well. Maybe I felt bad about myself and then they did even worse on the second homework. And then maybe I went home as a teacher and I gave myself a pep talk and I came back and I taught them and they got better. And then we got all excited and I did a really great job teaching and then they did really well. So their grades went up and then I got tired and maybe I didn't do a good job and their grades went down. I mean, that's totally a made up story. But when you look at a graph or a chart, that's actually a picture telling you a story about the numbers. And so that's why we want to create spark lines. And then I'm going to show you also how to create a chart. So I'm going to zoom back out. All right. So the last piece of this before we do the page setup is we wanted a chart, a clustered column chart on the student averages. And so to do that, you want to go ahead, we want the student names and we want the averages. So these are the range of cells that I'm going to select. So when you're asked to create a chart, you want to decide which cells on the worksheet are going to represent that chart. And I know, because I told you guys, I want their names and I want their averages. So I'm selecting these, right? But how do I select two ranges of cells that are not next to each other? So what you want to do is you want to select the first range, which would be the names. And so I'm actually going to include the label A3 in that because Excel is smart that if I were to include these titles, it's smart enough to create a chart and put those titles in the specific places and build you a really nice, beautiful looking chart. So I'm going to go ahead and select the range A3 to A12 and I've let go of my mouse. The trick to selecting another range of cells that's not next to it is to hold the control key down. So now I'm pressing control and I select the second range of cells and I let go of control. Okay, so I'm going to do that again. It's very, very important to remember to select the first range. Don't hold the control key down. Just select that with your mouse. And then hold the control key down and select the second range of cells. Okay. Once you've done that, you have an active selection. You can go to the insert menu and we could just pick recommended charts. And I wanted a cluster column. There it is. And you can see the names on the x-axis. And I can click OK. And that adds a chart in. I can move it around. I can format it. I can do different things to it. And you'll see I have two ribbons that opened up. I am creating this video on the previous version of Office because that's what's installed in my office at work. But it's all pretty much the same. This should all look very familiar to you. All right, and so then there were just some formatting options that I required. You know, you're going to dial in a different chart style. I believe it was chart style 13. And we wanted to add some data labels. You can click this chart elements button. That's going to give you a lot of formatting options to your chart. And you're going to learn about charts later on. I like to just introduce it early. And I just wanted to add the data labels. So, oh, not a data table. I want the data labels. And that just puts all of these average numbers right at the top of each one of those data bars. Okay. I'm going to pause it, or actually I won't pause it. I'll go over the absolute cell reference practice and I'll show a few pieces about that. All right, so in terms of working on this worksheet, what I'm looking for is to practice with an absolute cell reference. So we talked about relative cell referencing on the first worksheet. Relative cell referencing is when I link to cell locations. An absolute cell reference is created sometimes when you don't want the cell location to move when you're copying it. Okay, and so this worksheet is set up specifically for that. So I want to calculate the percentage of students in each class. How many students are in BPC110 compared to 105 compared to English, so on and so forth. So the first question I always ask is, do you know how to calculate a percentage? And so when I teach this in person, I ask my students and they're like, sort of. And so then I say, okay, if I have a class of 10 students, 4 girls and 6 boys, what percentage is girls? And immediately everybody says 40%. And I say, how did you know that? And they say, because it's 4 divided by 10, right? And if I took that and I were to multiply it by 100, that looks like a percentage, right? It's not really formatted. I would need to have that percent symbol after. But that's how we know how to calculate a percentage. I'm going to press delete. But what if I said the total number of students I had was 19? What percentage is girls? Well, then it would just be 4 divided by 19, right? And I would take that's about 21%, okay? That's how you calculate a percentage. The percentage is calculated as the individual amount over the total amount. So in order to know how many students, BPC110 students, make up the percentage, I have to take the individual amount, 75, divided by the total amount. Well, I don't have the total amount, so I have to calculate that first. So the total number of students would be all these numbers added together. And you should know from previous practice, but if not, there's a function right up here. Sum, the very first one, that's the one that most students are aware of, that they've learned earlier on. Sum will add a range of cells. So again, I place my cursor where I want the answer to go. I click auto sum, and it puts the sum function in, and it selects the correct range of cells. So I can press enter, and my total is 635. All right, so now what do I want to do? I want to write a formula. So before the sum, that's a function because it's math that's written for you. Excel already is writing that for you, pressing escape key. But sometimes we want to write math ourselves. So you always want to remember that every function and formula begins with an equal sign. So I'm going to start with an equal. And now I know from earlier that it's going to be 75 divided by 635. Now I'm going to do this wrong first just to kind of do a little teaching here. So let's say I typed in 75. I'm not creating a cell reference. And I divided it by 635. And I just typed that in. I get 12%. I pre-formatted this worksheet so that it shows a percentage. So if I copy this all the way down, well, I'm getting the same number. Why is that? Now I'm going to switch to what's called formula mode. If you press Control and tilde, that is the key that's next to the number 1, or Control with the grave accent. That switches you to the formula view. You can see what all the functions and formula are. You can see that when I copy that down, it just repeated the same numbers. It's just going to repeat 75 divided by 635. All right. So if I want, and so you certainly, I'm going to select all this, you certainly don't want to do equal 75 divided by 635 equal 68 divided by 635. That's impossible, right? That's would take you forever. Think, what if we had 100 courses we were doing that for? That makes no sense. I should be able to write it once and then copy it, create a flexible function or formula. All right, I selected both of those and I pressed delete on my keyboard, not backspace. That's for the Mac users out there. It's got to be delete. All right, so using what we've learned before, I'm going to go equal, and it's going to be 75 divided by the 635. But I'm going to use relative cell references. I'm going to link to those cell locations. Okay, I press enter. All right, I got my 12%. I can copy that down. Oh no. Right now you're like, oh my God, what's happening? What's going on? So what I like to tell my students is, if you see something weird, or you don't understand the numbers, or you don't understand what's happening in a cell, double click it. So I'm just going to double click this guy right here. And then trace what's happening. You can see, okay, it took the top number, 54, that's the individual amount, divided by the total. But when we look down here, it didn't take the total. It actually moved the cell location. I'm going to press escape. I'm going to do another one. Same thing here. All the cell locations move relative to where they began. That's what relative cell references are. Those are relative cell references. So what's happening, it's moving the bottom number, the denominator, down, right? And what's in this cell? Nothing. And nothing is a 0. So what's happening is you're taking a 45 and you're dividing it by 0. And so you're getting an error that says you can't divide by 0, which is one of the cardinal rules of math. Escape. I'm going to select all these and press delete. So sometimes when we write a function and formula, we don't want a cell location to move. So in this case, I always want to be dividing by 635. So I can rewrite this formula equal individual divided by the total. And now what I want to do is I'm going to turn this into an absolute cell reference. If you're on a Windows-based machine, not a laptop, you can press the function 4 key. It's at the top of the keyboard above the numbers. It has an F and the number 4. And when I do that, when I do that, it adds dollar signs around the column and the row. Okay, let me just get rid of that. You might be thinking, well, what if I'm on a Mac? Okay, if you're on a Mac, to turn it into an absolute cell reference, you have to know that this is going to be the absolute, and then you manually type the dollar sign in front. That's shift, dollar sign in front of the row, the column in the row. That's shift in the number 4. Okay. Windows-based users, you can also just manually type the dollar sign in. The function 4 key is a shortcut that's only on a Windows machine. And if you're on a laptop, because there's limited space, sometimes those function keys have dual purpose. So if you look at your laptop and you see an F4 and then you see like a little light bulb, then there should be another key somewhere on your keyboard. Usually it's like it says FN that you have to press to activate the function key. Okay. So if you have any questions about that, of course, anything here, you're going to email me. All right, so I made it an absolute cell reference. So now when I press enter, I still get my 12%. But when I copy it, now I have my numbers. And if I were to double click this, you can see, all right, it incremented the first one, the B5, the top number, that's a relative cell reference, but it kept the 635, the B12 the same. That's absolute, it sticks, it doesn't move. I'll press escape. I'll double click this guy. Top number, relative cell reference, that incremented to B8. Bottom number, it stayed B12 because I made it absolute. Okay. All right, I'm not going to talk about the pie chart. I'll let you see if you can figure that out. But just to show you how to do the page setup, I'll just do the first worksheet by itself. So I know your textbook takes you through this a little different way. This is how I like to do it. Whenever I do my page setup, I always like to go to the page layout tab. I believe you're required to set it to the orientation to landscape. So I'm going to click this. You will not see anything happen here in the worksheet. However, you will see a dotted line appear. What that dotted line is that's showing you at the edge of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So if I were just to go to File, Print, like a print preview, you can see my paper is turned, but you can see I have 4 pages. I have to keep clicking to get all the information. Okay. I'm going to go back. I actually want this to fit on the 8.5 by 11. I want everything to fit there. So right here in the scale to fit, I can choose the width at one page and the height to one page. And when you do that, you should see the dotted line move. Looks like I'm a little, I can't tell if it's on my screen, but if I go back to File, Print, you can still see I have the whole worksheet here, and now it's 1 page down at the bottom. To add the footer, I like to go into the page setup and expand the page setup dialog box down here. And then again, I could have changed my orientation here. I could have done the scaling here, and I just go to header footer. I choose custom footer. You put your cursor in the right section. I think I want it in the right section. And then you're not going to type the name of the file. This is the same, it's kind of similar to Word. We want to actually insert it as a field so that it updates every time we open the worksheet. So all you have to do is click this guy right here that looks like a little Excel icon, insert file name. You get a weird looking set of characters. That's just code that Excel understands, and you click OK. And you'll see there is the name of the file. I didn't change the name of my file at the top, so you can see that's the name of the file. If I do a print preview, you'll see here is the whole file. It's 1 page, and there is the file name. Okay, so you would just repeat those same steps on this worksheet. There is a way to do it where we link all the worksheets together, but I'm not going to show that because that makes things a little bit dangerous. It's okay to do them one at a time. So I'm coming up on almost 23 minutes. I know I spoke fast, so hopefully you made it all the way to the end. Hopefully this provides some clarification. I encourage you to redo the assignment and resubmit it, or if you didn't do it, now this will help you. And let me know if you guys have any questions.